Our objective here today is to discuss an approach that many people often overlook when it comes to getting into business for themselves, or actually using this as a means of growth. Especially during these times, during where underwriting restrictions are tightened, where lending houses are definitely scared to death of putting capital out there, and where folks are very scared in terms of starting new ventures or continuing on with their current venture. We want to look at the prospect of acquiring existing businesses out there, and that's for several reasons. The first is that this is a very low risk way of entering into your desired industry, and it allows for you to have some things that are already in place. Okay, and that of course looks very good to if you're looking to gain access to capital. We often have clients who get in contact with us, and they're looking for these very large sums of money that they can use for this new space, that new build out, being able to spend a couple $100,000 on outfitting a new business. And so for us, that's extremely risky, of course. It is among the most risky sorts of investments out there, just in terms of deploying capital for a new enterprise. And you can oftentimes, in as little as 50 or 60 cents on the dollar, acquire an existing enterprise that has all of the stuff that you need. And if you do need some capital, you can just kind of sprinkle it in to update, switch out, or just kind of modify what's already in place in order for you to get into business. And from a lender's eye, or from an angel investor's eye, or just anyone else whom you may approach to infuse capital into your business, they feel a lot more comfortable because, of course, you have several things that are already in place. You have employees that may be in place. You have it's something worked out where you have suppliers, you have distribution channels, you have something that's been in an existence beforehand. And so that curb that you have to kind of get over or cross is often cut short for you to break even immediately. And when we say break even, we just simply mean that your revenues will at least equal your expenses. And that's the first goal of any business, of course, not to take a loss. And when you go into business for the first time, or when you're looking to start a new location, the worst part of it is, of course, at the very beginning, you're taking a loss. And so we want to stop you from taking that loss right away, as quickly as possible. Okay. Now, throughout the presentation today, of course, please make use of the Q&A section here. If you have questions, drop them on in. We're going to go through this very quickly. It's extremely comprehensive, so please pay attention. Ask questions, of course, if you have them. And so what I'd like to do, since we have a very, very small group today, and of course, Rasul will help me out here, is I'd like to know, and you can drop it in the chat here, has anyone here ever purchased a company or sold a company? If you can just drop your answer in there, yes. If you have, if you can just drop that in really quickly, I'd like to see who we have on the line here with us in terms of their past experiences.
We have one no so far. We have another business that is actively looking at an acquisition. Of another business is in the process of looking at an opportunity. Another one's not yet. So those are the responses we have so far, Lou.
Okay, well, great. So that's good. And if you have an existing company, often we have folks who may be in one area of, say, the automobile industry. They may be wholesaling. They may be, working in a car repair, and they're looking to get into some other venture, some other avenue. So also use this as a means of growing your existing enterprise, and not just getting into business for the first time. So keep in mind that it can be used for both as we go throughout the presentation today. Okay. All right, let's start her on up. Here we go. 1 second for me. All right. So why do owners sell their businesses? This is a very key question that you want to ask, because most people can think of something that is, in quotations, used, right? And they can say it kind of has that air of ickiness to it, right? Somebody else had their hands on it. Someone else did something to it. I want mine to be brand new, so to speak, right? But we want to kind of get out of that realm of thinking. And part of that is because oftentimes when you acquire this existing enterprise, there are some pros and some cons that are going to come along with it. But you want to make sure that you are examining both ends of the spectrum, and that you really understand what those cons are, and if those cons have anything to do with why the owner is looking to sell that company. But there are typical reasons that come up for reasons, reasons as to why folks want to sell their companies: health, divorce, partner disputes. And if you are looking at partnering with someone in purchasing that new that business, or acquiring that new company out there, then often I want you to sit back and really examine the relationship you have with that individual, because oftentimes if it doesn't work between you two, if you can't establish principles that should govern your relationship, because let's face it, you're going to have arguments when you make money, you're going to argue when you lose money, and you're going to argue when you break even. So you guys have to have a way to actually attack those tumultuous times based on the rules that you have set forth for you to handle that relationship, because what you don't want it to do is cause you to have to put the business up for sale because you guys can't get along, okay? So partner dispute, death, burnout, retirement. A word on the end of burnout here. When the last owner burned out, if you carry on in the same manner that they did, you too can burn out. Okay, so when you're getting into that transaction, keep a fine eye on, okay, how can I automate these processes? How can I bring in a staff member to take care of this or take care of that, and delegate here and delegate there, so that I am not overwhelmed and I too burn out based on how this business was ran in the past. Okay, and then oftentimes we have retirement. Sometimes we just kind of age out of wanting to do what we have come to do within that particular company. Okay. Other reasons can be losing the lease. Meaning sometimes the landlord for that particular location may not want to renew the lease with that particular tenant. It may be something personal that has gone on, or their rental, their payment history, how they treated the property, who knows? And of course, you will have to negotiate typically a new lease, or you would like to at least, when you move into that location yourself, okay? If it is a brick and mortar location. And of course, a lot of our companies right now are online, so that's not a real issue. But even if they are online and you are, selling services, you may have locations where you keep or store your goods that you're selling, if it's a business based on selling goods, okay? Other reasons may be losing money. We'll talk about that just in terms of how the expense model can be altered so that you are making a profit, or the owner just doesn't like the business. And this happens sometimes. You start something and you just realize, hey, at this point in my life, I just don't like doing this anymore. And that's a real thing, folks. It's really a real thing out here.
Let me jump in real quick, Lou, just to quickly share, and a number of folks on here are already in the process, and so may very well be aware of this, and probably could even offer their own insights and thoughts and their experiences. But like any situation, going in and getting that research and finding out what's transpiring and why, and to what extent may problems that previous business had, what are the possibilities that those will impact or affect the new business's owner's ability to take over, grow, and develop and make successful that business. So definitely going in and finding out, was it a marketing issue? If you're not a marketer, then okay, you have to deal with that. If it was losing money, like Lou you just mentioned, why was it losing money? But once you get that real comprehensive, almost like you can't understate the amount of research and sort of just really going in and doing the due diligence about what's going on. Because you don't ever want to go into any situation blind or not having as much information, so you can make the best and intelligent decisions and strategic decisions about, okay, what's going to require our team to kind of go in and make sure to continue running this business in a way that's going to work for those parties that are involved. So just a quick little piece of information just to share as well.
That is spot on, Rasul. And remember, there are always three sides to the sale. Okay. And that's in multiple different, multiple aspects of the sale, but especially when it comes to the reasons for selling or the financials, even. There is what you see as the buyer, and there is what the seller sees as the seller, and then there's the truth. Okay. And you'll especially realize that once you get down into analyzing the financials, what's the truth? And we all know, based on how you may run your business and how you may pierce the corporate veil or not, a lot of business owners spend way too much time uh, attempting to expense away all of their revenue in order to lower their taxable income. But in fact, when you're looking to sell the company, that hurts you because the buyer wants to see where you're making money. And so, of course, as you're going through that process of examining the financials, you're going to want to be able to back out all of those things to get to the truth. So when we get down to our basic instincts of what we're doing and why we want to sell and what prices we're looking to garner, I kind of take all of these things into account because they're going to have to be things you examine. And of course, you can use professionals to help you out with this. If you have an accountant, of course, all of us should make sure you run their financials by the accountant. And not just any accountant. I tend to always lean towards, finding out which accountants may specialize within that particular industry, because it's that which what matters. Just like you wouldn't necessarily look to have your entertainment contract examined by your cousin who's a divorce attorney. I mean, both are lawyers, right? But one has a specific expertise, a certain niche in a certain area, and you want to make sure that accountant that you use can have a certain level of experience dealing with clients in that particular industry. All right, so moving along here. Why do people buy a business? The first, of course, can just be independence, right? Hey, I want to strike out on my own. Some people love the challenge. It's just the way in which they approach life. For some, it can be personal growth, all right? For others, it can be financially based. And for others, it can be their lifestyle. And there are a host of other reasons as to why you would want to buy a company, okay? And what we'll just point out here, of course, is that the two main positions that you'd like to approach this topic from, of strength rather, is where you're entering into an industry or a business for the first time and you're looking to limit your risk and your exposure. And then number two, you already have an existing enterprise and you're looking to grow your existing enterprise while limiting your risk and limiting your exposure. Okay.
Quick question, Lou. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had not a quite similar situation to one of our clients last year, but it was about they were getting ready to sell their business. Now, oftentimes when you bring in an expert or bringing in a resource, a consultant that looks at business valuations, that's usually, or not usually, often it can be, for instance, if you're looking for equity, right? Investors to bring in, they want to know what's the business valued at, to know what percentage to own. What, if any, does it make sense? To what extent does it make sense to bring in a business valuation professional to sort of give you to understand how much is a business valued in terms of, you're being able to take it over? Does that make sense to do that? Or is there another professional that you should look to get that kind of information about what is a business really valued at?
Rasul, you just asked an excellent question. So there are certified business valuation professionals out here. There is actually a body that certifies people who are usually within the accounting realm or bookkeepers that can provide you with a professional valuation of the business. And these are the guys that this is what they do. They have the experience. They're going to go through and, take a fine tooth comb to the financials and really back out all of the junk expenses to get down to the very hard line operating expenses and cost of goods sold to give you, hey, what's the real profit here? And what multiple should I pay based on how the industry is doing right now? Now, whether or not you need to hire one of them, and of course you have folks that can do that for you that, kind of aren't certified, and you have folks who are certified. The certified professionals are going to cost you, but of course you get that comfort knowing that this person is certified, right? And it depends on your familiarity within the industry. So if you already own a company that is similar or in the same industry, then you pretty much can look at that business and look at the sales and look at the number of units sold, the number of services provided on an annual basis, and you can kind of dig into the financials yourself, and you can see how this would work. And so if you have that experience, you know, I would go based on what you know, and maybe run it past your accountant to make sure there's no funny business going on. But if, of course, if you're very new to this, then by all means hire a professional. So great question, Rasul. Thanks for bringing that up. And of course, guys, don't let Rasul ask all the great questions. Feel free to chime in when you have some there so we can take care of you. Okay. Moving right along here. With the buyer-seller relationship, let's examine a couple of things here. First, you guys have different goals, okay? And of course, you're looking to buy at the cheapest rate, right? And then you have folks who are looking to sell to you at the highest rate, right? And so you want to know how you're going to get that fair price. And we'll talk about how to make sure you're getting that fair price during what we call the due diligence period as we move along here. So the selling price will vary based on the buyer's, you know, motivation to buy and the opportunity envisioned. Of course, if you pay attention to different mergers and acquisitions out here in the regular marketplace, you'll always see, you know, hey, if you know what you can do with that target acquisition, then sometimes it may be worth more, or, you know, just whatever the owner is asking, right? Or of course, if you know something's coming down the pike, so to speak, that may lessen the value in the future, then you may have more bargaining power to get a reduced price. So it's all based on what you envision and how you're looking to make that kind of synergistically work with whatever you have in place already, okay? And the selling price, of course, is going to be based on their reason for selling. Some folks are desperate. You have to be able to pick out whether or not they're desperate. Everyone's going to say, hey, I'm not desperate. You know, they want to negotiate with you from a point of strength. And so you have to be able to kind of zero in on what exactly are their motivations, okay? Moving right along. All right, here we go. So steps in the process, all right? And these are very simple steps here, of course, and if you've gone through this before, then you'll know these. If not, we'll cover them briefly. Of course, you want to be able to identify the potential business, right? And right now, you'll notice that many companies have closed their doors. COVID has forced the closure. So you'll see many lease spaces right now, if you're looking at a brick and mortar place, and the office is closed. I mean, their company's closed. They have keys, they have all the equipment and assets still on site for the most part, but the business is just shut down at the current point in time, okay? And so we'll talk about how to target those as we move throughout the presentation here as well. All right, so you want to identify the potential business that you want to buy. You also want to identify from a higher level the industry that you're looking within, and then kind of target those companies and see and prospect, of course, if you're working with a professional or not. You can do it yourself. It's very simple to do. You can download list. You can take a look at, you know, how long the company has been around based on the list providers out there. A great one to use is Data Axle, formerly, you know, Info USA. They will cost. However, they have the best data out there. And of course, it tells you those kind of key things, such as, you know, when the company was established, how many employees they may have, et cetera, which are things that you want to see. And of course, the longer the business has been around, usually the better. Not in every case, but it is a very important data point to examine when you're looking at this, okay? Generally speaking, after you have located the company that you'd like to buy, you will sign an NDA if they're using a business broker. You're going to go sign that documentation, get it back via e-sign, fax, whatever they're using. And then you're going to actually meet at the business, okay? And you're going to get a tour of the business, okay? If you like what you see, and if you like the financials that they give you, at that point in time, you're going to sign what's called a letter of intent. And so, pardon me, once you have that LOI in place, what this is going to do is kind of formalize things for you to move along in the process, okay? And once you have that letter of intent in place, you have discussed a purchase price, and you guys have agreed at an amount. And you've also agreed that you're going to have certain things in place as you move throughout really examining the sale of this business, okay? And so I can just use for an example of what would happen afterwards. You're going to move into what's called the period of due diligence. And in this period of due diligence, you're going to be able to have full access to being inside that company, inside that business. We can use something as simple as, say, let's say you're looking to purchase a 7-Eleven franchise or a brick and mortar establishment, right? You're going to be on site. You're going to be able to actually count down in the cash register every day. You're going to be able to actually interact and interface with the employees, with your suppliers, the delivery people, everyone, just to see how things move and shake as you move along throughout the day, throughout the week. And due diligence periods can last from anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months. Of course, depending upon what industry you're in, depending upon, whether or not that industry is seasonal, you're gonna, have that period of time to examine how things may fluctuate to see if this is the right opportunity for you. Now, during that due diligence period, you're gonna make sure that you examine certain things and make sure that, especially in businesses where they are accepting cash, that, because the owners are going to, of course, show one thing on their financials. And then, of course, if it's a cash business, sometimes the cash just doesn't make it to the bank. But the owner may tell you, hey, I really make this amount of money, but you want to actually see, do they really make that amount of money? Because if he says he's getting this much in cash and this much in credit card sales, you want to actually count down in that cash register with the employee or with the owner, whomever it is, to make sure that amount of money is actually coming into the business, okay? Now, after the due diligence period, you're going to put together your sales agreement. You will arrange financing for the deal. We'll talk about this here coming up, and then you will actually close the deal, okay? Moving right along. Now, when you meet with the buyer, with the seller, keep in mind certain things. This is their baby, okay? And no matter what, even if you're selling your home, you want to feel comfortable to know that you're selling it to someone whom you trust with this precious asset of yours that you have kind of curated and molded, right, over the years. And so be prepared to really have a personal interaction with someone. People think it's all business, but really it's not, okay? This is a relationship thing. And then also, when you actually purchase the business, there is going to be a period of time that you'll want to negotiate into your contract where you're going to have the owner to stick around and help you and provide guidance, of course, after you close on the sale. And so you want to make sure you have a good relationship there and have make a good impression, because that may also help you in the negotiation process, okay? So do your research on the industry prior to that meeting. You want to walk in having some knowledge. Just don't walk in totally blue. If, of course, this is your first time actually moving into that industry or examining that industry. And I want you to make sure that you put yourself in a position to move fast. And so there are a couple of great websites out there: bizbuysell.com, businessbroker.net. Those are the major two. Bizbuysell.com pretty much owns the other websites that you'll see at the top of the Google search for websites that list businesses for sale. And so get on the automatic list in terms of receiving emails to make sure that you can be the first who's notified about companies when they come up. Because if it's a good company, they're going to get a lot of attention immediately, just like a home for sale in a very desired area, right? It's going to get the immediate attention. And so you want to be among some of the first individuals to jump in and take a look at that business on a serious level, okay? All right, here we go. So in that meeting, there are a couple of questions that you want to like kind of examine internally, okay? And these aren't questions you necessarily ask, but you want to think about this as you are meeting and feeling the vibe, the atmosphere of that particular location in that business. Do you like it? How do you feel? Can you see yourself spending days and, quite frankly, nights sometimes working in that business, okay? Do you like the seller? And I often get asked questions about this. Hey, why does that matter? Well, it matters because that's the type of person that your customers are used to dealing with. That is the type of that it will be the individual that you will have to work with after you close on the deal. And also, do you trust them? So what is it that, what's the vibe that you pick up when you go into that location? Now, what you want to also do is make sure that you impress the seller. I know this seems, crazy, like, hey, I'm the person coming with the money here. Why do I have to worry about what this person thinks? I mean, we often, hey, if I'm walking into a store, why does it matter how I'm dressed? Right? Because I'm the person who's purchasing, right? Well, unlike walking into a store, this seller has to make a decision to do business with you. Okay, so it's very key that you show up and tip top and present yourself at your best when you're looking to enter into this relationship, which of course will go through the all important crucial stage of negotiations. All right, now some questions you want to go over at that buyer seller meeting. You want to be told, have them to explain to you, tell me about this business. Like really break it down to me. Pull them aside. Go to a corner where no one else can hear you guys talking. Ask them, what was their journey? Okay. What's their typical day? And really get into why they're selling. Really feel them out. See if you can trust those answers they're giving you, right? Talk to them face to face if you can do that. And of course, a lot of sellers nowadays are using business brokers. And so if you're having to discuss this with the business broker, then of course you are one person removed from the actual seller. You're talking to a salesperson. So you want to be able to see if you can arrange a meeting where if the business broker has let you know that the seller is adverse to meeting with buyers because they just don't want to deal with that. Try to make sure they know that you're serious and that you want to actually get in there and have this conversation where you guys are able to really get down into the weeds of the business. Okay. So you want to make sure you're actually meeting with the seller if at all possible. Okay. Ask them what keeps them up at night. What do you hate about this? Really get into it, have them to open up to you, and then ask them about their lifestyle. Is this something where they have to be there every single day? Is that something that you're looking to do based on the revenues? Are you going to be able to rearrange the operations such that you're not there at the all day, every day, maybe like they are? Okay. Does it allow for you to do that? And if it doesn't, how could you change it? And you want to ask them, of course, how would you change this business if you could make any changes to make it perfect? And sometimes they're open enough to tell you, and sometimes they don't know, or else they would have done it themselves, right? And that's going to take you doing your own research and consulting others who may be in that same industry. And then lastly, of course, you want to make sure you are able to get a hold of their last at least 3 years of sales. Okay. I say 3 years, there are ups and downs and everything. Especially right now throughout the COVID-19 period that we're in right now. We're going to know 2020's numbers are going to look horrible in most industries. And probably in 2021, they're going to be depressed as well. So you want to look at the last 3 years, right? What was 2019 like for you? How about 2018 and 19, right? And then of course, in Rasul, you can feel free to jump in here as well. How have you been able to pivot? How have you been able to change things such that the business has been able to keep on thriving and keep on moving and keep your doors open if you're in an industry where it's been impacted heavily by COVID-19? Also, with regard to the last 3 years of sales, you want to look at in the industry what we call SDE, okay? And that is just the seller's discretionary earnings. So if you have looked at the figures around cash flow, okay, we're really trying to figure out what's the profit, what are you walking away with here without all of the other junk that you may be expensing into the business, which kind of hides what the real profits are. Okay, moving right along, some other questions that you want to kind of ask here, and take note of these here, just in terms of the competitors. That's kind of easy if you're looking at a brick and mortar establishment, right? You can kind of drive or do a Google search and see what else is in the area. And you really want to make sure that you go visit those locations if possible, if they're brick and mortar locations. If they are locations that are online, and you want to check them out thoroughly online, mystery shop them, okay? So if this is a service-based company and you can't necessarily walk in, then do your due diligence, right? Call them up, act as if you're a customer, see how they answer the phone, check out what language, what verbiage they're using, see what type of sales or packages they're offering to people. You know, look at their process and look at how successful they are. And if they're doing better than the target acquisition or the company you're looking to purchase, if they're doing better than them, maybe those are some really quality lessons learned that you can take away and kind of infuse into that new company after you sell it. And maybe you can make some projections, you know, based on what their current revenues are on how you can change it or kind of make things tick up for yourself, okay? Also, being able to look at the industry trends. There are a number of specific websites out there that you can use to grab a hold of different industry reports that come out annually. Did I hear you, Rasul?
No. I had something to say, but I'll let you finish your comment, Lou.
Go right ahead.
I was going to, periodically, around various places, you'll see big old signs that say under new management. Along the lines of what Lou's talking about is, what is the relationship to that business to its current customers and to the marketplace? How much reputation management are you going to have to go in, and really getting some insight and details on that, really helps understand what is the positioning of this particular business in that particular community or in that area or what have you. If it's online, those customers, or if they have an online component, those customers aren't just going to be local. But once again, to Lou's saying, in terms of meeting questions and things that you need to be researching, what is its reputation? And is there some resources that you're going to have to put in to reintroduce, quote unquote, the business to the community? Or are they riding high and the person is looking, as Lou said earlier, they're looking to get out because their interest has shifted, and there's little resources that have to go into doing that. But that just becomes a part of it, just finding out how does this business sit in the marketplace, and to what extent are you have to pour in resources to either rebuild the brand, continue doing what it's doing, or if you have your own sort of different, slightly different ideas and spin that you want to put on the business, maybe you have to put a whole strategy to sort of re-engage and sort of communicate to your customers that prices could be going up, down, all these different things, different components in terms of your operations and your deliveries of products and services that may be affected by your purchasing of the business. Just something to put on the table right there quickly.
Yep. Thank you, Rasul. Thank you. Some other questions that you'll want to just kind of look at here, just in terms of examining, what you're going to ask the owner or the current owner, the seller at that meeting. Of course, you want to make sure that they're going to agree to certain terms that you may have. You don't want to waste your time. Time is our most precious asset. And so you get those questions out verbally to them to make sure this is worth the pursuit, okay? Things such as whether or not they're going to sign a non-compete agreement, right? I mean, the worst thing you want to do is to buy a company that provides a service, and then you look up, you didn't make the owner sign a non-compete. They start one themselves again. They go, hey, I figure I'll just start another one, right? With some new partners, et cetera. And then, of course, now you're having to compete against the old owner in all of their old customers who are used to dealing with them or their way of doing business. So, kind of make sure you have those questions lined up before you enter that meeting to make sure this is going to be a worthy endeavor and a reason that you should spend your time. There's a reason you should spend your time on this, because it's a possibility of it going through with some of the basic terms that you need to have worked out in your contract. All right, moving right along here. All right, here are some other questions that you'll want to ask, and of course you'll be able to see these as you go back through, and we'll kind of move past some of the questions here that we have. Sake of time. Okay. All right. Let's get down to the letter of intent. Okay. This is what you're going to present to initiate and formalize the sale of that particular business. Okay. As you call it, the LOI. Okay. We're talking about the letter of intent. That's going to allow for you to really say, hey, here's the price that I am looking to to offer you. You guys can go back and forth, okay? And you're at that point going to be entitled, once this is signed and you negotiate a price, you're going to be able to then demand and take a look at documentation that backs up their claims in terms of revenue, etc. If they have a great business broker, they will have worked up a sheet for you already. Most times that will not be the case. Okay, but if you have it, great. You want to demand the documentation so that you can do it yourself or have your accountant to do so. Okay, and you also want to make sure at this point in time, okay, that, well, the seller's going to make sure that you have the funds to actually move forward with the transaction, because nobody wants to waste time with a buyer that can't actually pay for this particular business. Okay, and so you will have to place, of course, a deposit on file that will go into an escrow account. And at that point, you'll be able to enter into the period of due diligence. Okay. Now, some of the things to look out for when you're completing your LOI and looking to negotiate your letter of intent with that owner. Okay. The buyer to make a loan application within 5 days of acceptance of this agreement. Okay. You want to make sure that you give yourself enough time. Okay. In order for you to have things in place on your end financially, and we'll talk about how to negotiate some favorable terms for you as the buyer. Okay, you want to make sure that the buyer examination and approval of 3 years of financial and tax returns is key. Okay, and that you want to make sure that you get to examine any of the assets, inventory, and equipment that are on file. All right. Now, the seller, of course, is to make sure, you have to make sure that seller is going to sign the non-compete agreement. This seems so simple sometimes and folks overlook it, but believe me, it's a serious issue that comes up. And if the seller did not sign the non-compete, guess what? They're going to be your competitor. And this is what you don't want by all means. Okay.
Let's jump in real quick. Go ahead, finish your thought, Lou, and then we'll just finish. There's a question I just want to get to. So just finish your thought.
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Okay, now the question is, can the entire business be partially financed by the bank?
Can the entire business be partially financed by the bank? Of course. Well, it depends on where the other part's coming from, right? You can negotiate in owner financing, which is where the seller will hold a portion of that note, or you may have cash, right? Most times, if the bank is going to finance the purchase of that asset, that company, they're going to require that you have skin in the game. And of course, they will require that, well, they will be financing part of that business. So did I answer that question? I'm not sure who asked that question, but maybe they can kind of let me know if I've kind of covered what they needed me to answer there. Did they reply?
I'm assuming you answered it. They didn't respond with a no, so I think you might be good, Lou.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. So, all right. So moving right along here, examining the assets and the inventory and the equipment list. Of course, you're going to pay for the business. You're going to pay, and when I say for the business, that's going to mean you're going to pay a multiple of their earnings, right? So let's just say they're, for math's sake, netting, $100,000. That's what we're going to say. Hey, here's what the business clears each year. And you guys are using an industry multiple of, say, 3. So you're going to pay $300,000 for that business. Well, that's just the business itself. Okay. There's also the other assets on hand within the business. So if the business has inventory, you're going to have to pay for that inventory separate unless you negotiate it in, which most times an owner will be unwilling to do. Because, of course, those are assets on hand that go outside of the business itself and the revenue stream, okay? So make sure you're able to examine those assets, that inventory and that equipment, okay? And you may have to have someone come in to look it over. Of course, in the case of inventory, most oftentimes you will have to hire a third party. There are companies that are specifically set up to come in and tabulate inventory, which is especially the case in, say, retail. If you're buying a convenience or liquor store or something like that, I mean, you don't have time to go around and count, hundreds of thousands of bottles yourself, right? I mean, who has that type of time, right? And then, of course, knowing based on how they are barcoded, what their values are, and then relating that back to the purchase orders from the distributor, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to want to have to pay a third party to come in and count that inventory. And that's what I mean by examining that inventory and their equipment. Of course, you're making sure it's in working order, et cetera, et cetera. Also with that equipment, make sure you have any of the relationships that are on file for, people who come out and fix that sort of thing, or if they have warranties on that equipment, or if they're currently leased, you're being able to take over the leases on that equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Also making sure that you're going to be able to renegotiate the terms of the lease with the landlord, if of course that business is physically located, brick and mortar, or if you have an office that you're moving to. Okay.
Got another question here for you to drop in, Lou. Yeah, one of the participants asked, get some clarification on what a multiple is, and the importance of that, and who determines a multiple to be used for the business of that.
Sure. So within certain industries, the multiple is simply the number used that we multiply the annual profits by. So let's, in that example, if we're looking at, say, a laundromat, okay? Generally speaking, the multiple is going to be, on average, about, I'd say 4 to 5 times the multiple will be 4 or 5, okay? And so you're going to take that multiple and you're multiplying that times, again, for math's sake, if that laundromat gives you a net profit of $100,000 a year, then if the multiple in the laundry industry is 4 or 5, you would multiply that times 100,000. And so the business is worth about $400,000 to $500,000 in that case. Okay, so that's all. And that multiple will vary based on the industry that it's in, and it also is based on the customer base that the company has. And so, as an example, if the company that you're looking to buy is contractually based, let's say they take on government or private contracts, multi-year contracts, right? Then what you're looking to do is say, hey, well, what pipeline is in place? How long are these contracts? And so you're looking at what are the secured revenue streams that are already in place. And of course, you're going to want to value the company based on what you already see in front of you. And you're going to be able to see clearly based on those contracts, how long, what type of money should be made over the coming years. Okay. And hopefully I answered that question pretty thoroughly there.
Yeah, I think you did. The next question, Lou, is there any resources that you would recommend or refer to get further information on how multiples work or the various ways that they're calculated? Any resources to share?
To gather an industry multiple, you're typically going to have to refer to a business valuation expert. And okay, so I'll also say this is discretionary as well. Okay. Some people, depending on, just the seller's motivation and what all they're looking to get away from or get from out underneath, they are going to definitely be willing to negotiate, and they may disregard the multiple itself. Multiples are generally going to be very hard lined. The higher the purchase price, the more sophisticated the structure of the business. But when you're looking at our, sales prices that are typically under, $500,000 or so, under $300,000 or so, you're typically going to look at that 3 to 5 year mark. But if you're looking for those hard line industry multiples out there, generally going to a certified business valuation expert, they're going to be able to rein in that information to give out to you. Okay. Any other questions along that line?
No, I think everything's good. Folks are just, this meeting is going to be recorded, and typically after all of our presentations, they are sent to participants. So yes, there will be a copy that will be available to everyone on this call.
Okay. All right. So generally during this due diligence period, and I want to hone in here, the due diligence period is so important, okay, guys? When you have free access to everything, okay, you want to investigate the heck out of that business, okay? You want to find out, you want to run all the searches, okay? And especially if you're buying the business outright, and we'll talk about the difference between an outright sale, a stock sale, and an asset sale. If you buy the business outright, you're liable for everything that that owner did previously, okay? So if someone slipped on the property and fell a year ago or whenever, right? And you now own the business, you're now liable. Okay, so you want to check out and make sure that there aren't any litigation issues out there. Okay, if there are certain certifications or some things that you're going to apply for where you need to make sure that the company hasn't had a history doing this or that, well, if it's an outright sale, you have bought that history as well. So be careful of these things when you're looking to purchase an existing enterprise out there, and just make sure that they don't exist. Now, am I saying that an asset sale is better because you aren't taking on that company's history? No, I'm not. There's a lot that comes along with having that history as well, just in terms of the credit, the business credit, just in terms of your being able to qualify and be designated for certain things. Having that history is important, but you don't want to get that bad stuff that can come along with the business's history as well. And you'll see here the other items listed just in terms of due diligence topics that you want to take care of and make sure that you are not going to have to run into any trouble. The other huge issue here that I want you to pay attention to are current leases in place that may be for equipment that have been leased in the business's name, and those will fall under liabilities, and then also taxes, business taxes that are owed. So you want to make sure that there are no taxes owed on that company, and you don't want to have any issues with the IRS or the state in terms of taxes owed for sales that the previous owner did not pay. All right, so this kind of gets to the heart of the question that was asked previously. Financing the deal, 3 options, okay? You can use your own money, your own cash, okay? You can use bank financing, which can be conventional financing, the bank's own dollars, or SBA dollars, right? An SBA loan, rather, which is insured and guaranteed by the SBA. It's still the bank's dollars. And then also there's seller financing, okay? Typically what you want to do is structure that sale where you can come out of your pocket with the smallest amount of cash possible. Cash is king, believe it, okay? If you can save the dollar, save it. Make sure that you actually are able to negotiate in owner financing. Why is that important? Seller financing is important because you're actually having the owner demonstrate to you that they believe in what they're selling you, right? They're saying to you, hey, I know that this business is going to continue on earning and it's not going to fall apart. And which is part of the reason why the seller has to feel comfortable with you, because if they're going to take on a note, they want to make sure that you as the buyer are going to be able to run this business properly, right? And be able to keep on earning and making money. Therefore, they're going to be paid on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, however you have it structured for that part of the note that they're going to hold back, okay? And so keep that in mind. And oftentimes, if you're going to have the owner to hold the note, try to negotiate that as much as possible, okay? Don't simply pay off the note over the next 2, 3, or 5 years. Try to make that monthly note as low as you can and have a balloon payment at the end of that period. Therefore, you're able to kind of cut your expenses with the cash flow during those first few years of operating that enterprise, okay? Next, here we go. All right, using your money wisely, okay? If you have 100% of the purchase price available to you, okay, you may want to consider buying a larger business. So if you have let's just say if you have $100,000, okay, don't simply look for a business that is listed for sale at 100,000 or an owner who will take 100,000. Why not go after an enterprise that has a sale price, or where the seller is looking to sell it for 200,000, right? Because now you can put up maybe half, right? And then have the owner hold the other half as a note if you're so fortunate, okay? Also, if you are eligible to receive financing, then maybe with your bank or lender, you can put up $100,000. The lender will chip in $100,000, and then you can get the seller to hold a note for $100,000. And now you're able to buy an enterprise that garners a sales price of $300,000. So use your cash wisely. All right, next up, what are some of the hurdles that you're going to encounter if you're looking to go through a bank? Okay, banks are reluctant to lend to buy a small business. Okay, it's just the case. All right, they're reluctant enough to lend to you for your business, but they're also they're more reluctant to lend to you for your small business. Okay, they're a little bit less reluctant to lend for you to buy a business, but that's going to depend on your resume. They're going to look at a couple of things, right? The first, of course, is how much skin do you have in the game? How much cash are you putting up of your own money? What is your financial picture when you have to fill out that form for the bank to indicate your financial standing right now? How many assets do you have? Assets, property, collateral, cash, stocks, cash equivalents out there. What is your strength as a borrower, right? What is your history? What is your resume? Do you have any experience in this industry? You want to make sure that you have those ingredients already in place if you're looking to go to the bank or a lender in order to qualify for funding. Okay. Now, another thing to think about here is that the bank has no clue on how to operate this small business. All right. They have to make sure that you have the expertise to do so. And this is especially great for those of us who have an existing company and they're looking to purchase a business to further expand their enterprise, expand their brand, because you have all the experience that banks or lenders just love to see. Okay.
Real quick, we got a question here.
Yep, go right ahead.
This particular question is that they are familiar with revenue sharing and paying a decreasing percentage for 3 years. Are you familiar with this, and can you talk about this kind of purchase?
With revenue sharing?
Yeah, it says the person has heard of revenue sharing and paying a decreasing percentage for 3 years. They want to know if you've heard of, or are you familiar with this? Can you talk about this type of purchase?
Are they speaking of revenue sharing with the seller or with a third party, such as a landlord or someone else? Which can they?
All right, we could ask them to just share the clarification on that so we know, because that's all they have. So if they could share the specifics with regard to what Lou asked, we could get more specific to answer that question.
Yeah, so if they can kind of type in and be more clear there, revenue sharing can take place in several different facets of the business. I mean, there can be revenue sharing in place when you are selling the company or when you're buying that company, and look to there can be, a way in which you're splitting the revenues with the seller. With some companies, especially, let's say that you're looking to take on a lease at one of the airports, federally funded airports, then of course you may have to pay a percentage of your revenue to your landlord, depending upon how you're able to negotiate that lease. There are a couple of different ways in which revenue sharing would work, but it's not something that I recommend, if at all possible, if you can get around that per se, because you want to gain access to all of your cash flow that you can, and kind of standardize or make it as cheap as you can in terms of being able to pay off that note or that seller financed portion that you'll have in place. So some people think of this, it's the same if you think of, say, a merchant cash advance loan. Hey, it's only going to be this percentage of your revenue. And you may say to yourself, hey, well, okay, fine, no problem. But remember, if your revenue goes up, that payment goes up as well. And so I'm a fan of making sure that things are as stable and ironclad as possible, where you're not having these fluctuating payments here and there. Of course, provided things are on the up and up. Okay, and hopefully I kind of answered their question, but I'd like to be more clear on what they were asking, Rasul, if I could.
Okay. Yeah, if they chime back in, I think from what I'm reading there, overall, just wanted you to give your thoughts on it in general, because I don't see a retyped message. So I'm thinking that the way you addressed it was, at least at the moment, pretty good information.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So the truth about lenders, just finishing up here, just in terms of the SBA lenders, what they're going to require: detailed documentation, personal collateral, and they will charge you additional fees. And going back up to the second point here, banks or lenders in general prefer to lend on assets versus goodwill. All right. Meaning the more collateral that you have, the better. Okay. So if you're looking to enter into this transaction and utilize financing, check out, your home, the home value, how much equity you have in it, and be willing to utilize that as a negotiating tool for being able to get the best deal that you can for a loan when you're in discussions with lenders to help you with the purchase price for that business. Okay, seller financing, all right? Sometimes it may be absolutely necessary to complete the deal, okay? However, most sellers want all cash at closing. Why not? Believe it or not, and I know this is hard for some of us to believe, nobody wants to be on the hook for your performance in order to receive their check, if at all possible, okay? You have more negotiating power if you're offering all cash. No bones about it. If you're going to buy a business for, let's just say, $300,000, and that's what the seller wants, and you say, hey, I'll give you $200,000, and you'll hold a note for the other $100,000. Hey, great. And if they come back and say, well, no, I want all cash, well, if you have the ability to say, well, I'll give you $225 cash right now. Okay. If you're paying all cash, you definitely have to use that to your advantage and drive the price into the floor as much as you can. Okay. Now, the seller has to believe in the business and the buyer if they are going to give you seller financing. You have to understand, again, that relationship that you strike up with the seller is going to be very important, very crucial. And the training you receive from that seller after the sale or during after the sale of the business is going to be important for you to understand how to run that company effectively. And of course, their impression of you is going to dictate whether or not they're going to feel comfortable accepting a note to receive payments while you run that business on your own and generate enough revenue, enough income to pay them on a monthly basis. Okay. Also, rather or not, the seller is going to have an ongoing interest in the success of the business. Of course, seller financing will imply this. And depending on the type of sale, we'll kind of get into that, which is a little bit more complicated in terms of the structures of sales, if they're going to hang around, if they're going to receive some sort of royalty or something in place, but we won't necessarily get all into that right here. Okay. But remember, the key to owner financing between the buyer and the seller is is the chemistry that you guys can strike up. Okay. All right. Next. Okay. So also, what I want you to pay attention to here is that how this deal is going to be structured. Okay. And from the seller's standpoint, they may be concerned about taxes. That's really a huge issue. The higher the sales price, for most of us, it's not a huge issue. But how you structure that seller financing note is very key. One of the typical parts of that agreement is going to be that if you default on that note, they have the right to walk right back in, because the business is the collateral itself, and take the business back from you. So I don't care if you have a 5-year note in place and you've been paying for 3 years, and all of a sudden, if the agreement states that, hey, if you are 3 payments behind, they will be able to go to court and essentially foreclose on that business. That's it. The jig is up. Okay. But you want to kind of make sure you've negotiated the right things in place. And of course, driving that monthly cost, that quarterly cost, however you have structured it to pay them, down as much as possible, and deferring the majority of that note to the end of the term is going to be great. Okay, so you want to kind of get that person out of your hair, but manage the relationship and the payments during the payback term to make them as low as possible. All right, moving right along here. Now let's talk about the asset versus the stock purchase, okay? An asset sale, okay, versus a stock sale. If it's just an asset sale, which is what we talked about here, and during COVID-19, I want you guys to think about this, right? There's so many businesses that are struggling out here, right? You really have a unique opportunity right now to capitalize on distressed companies that have all the infrastructure that you want. They have the supplier relationships, they have the employees, they have the website, they have the marketing verticals in place, right? You can buy these companies right now for pennies on the dollar, as long as you know how to prospect for them. The advantages of doing an asset sale, okay, which of course is what you would look to do if you don't want to buy that company outright, is that you don't have any liability, as we discussed, okay? You're not responsible for anything the business owner did prior to your buying that company, okay? You're not liable for any employee issues, any debts, and of course, you're going to look to take on this company without, you don't want to have anything that's hindering your progress moving forward, and that's easily achievable with an asset sale. Now, the disadvantages are, like I discussed before, you don't get that company's history. So there's no established credit. You're having to start all over again with your company's credit and build that up. Of course, we offer a great seminar on how to build your business credit here at Wakeif, a couple of times throughout the year. But when you buy a company outright with the stock sale, right, you will be able to, of course, take advantage of that history. You will be able to have those same employees that come on board. You have that history there with them as well. And you can negotiate the transfer of the leases and contracts. The disadvantage, of course, is that you will not be able to negotiate the transfer of the leases and contracts. So if you have equipment that's leased, if you have a lease space for the, if you have a brick and mortar location, okay, you can just, you won't be able to really negotiate the transfer because they're still dealing with the same entity, technically, okay? With regard to new licenses, they're going to go on the old company's history. And so, if you're if you're buying a company that may have had some reports on it, if they've been in trouble with the Department of Regulatory Affairs in that particular jurisdiction, this may hinder you, of course, with regard to being able to move forward within your new enterprise. Now, the stock sale versus the asset sale, some of the advantages here of a stock sale, of course, the inverse is true. Established credit, okay? Many times, no or minimal operating capital is required. And here's the thing, of course, when you have a stock sale in place, sometimes those shares are just as good as anything else. And so, of course, a situation where you're able to negotiate that sale and gain a stock, then what's used in place of the stock in terms of transferring that value, in place of cash, in terms of transferring that value is the stock. And so you'll be able to save your funds, save your money in a lot of cases there. Sometimes you may be able to leave the prior or previous owner with shares or with stock in the company also, which of course they can hold on to. And that's a whole another negotiation tool that you can use in being able to get the best price while spending the least amount of cash out of your pocket. All right, the advantages continue here: leases, contracts, employees, all the licenses, no public notification, of course, sales tax, which is a great one here, FF&E. There are no deposits that are required in many cases, and of course, your corporation tax and employee, all that other stuff just stays right in place. Smooth sailing. You don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of establishing an entire new entity and an entire new base of operation, so to speak, financially speaking. Okay. The disadvantages of the asset sale is that, of course, the disadvantages of a stock sale of course, with the legal liability for the corporation prior to purchase, as we've discussed. The assets are normally fully depreciated. Okay, so that means that when you're buying that new company, you want to be able to get the tax write-off for the depreciation of the current assets that that company owns. But if they've already been depreciated, you can't depreciate them all over again. So that's a disadvantage there. And sometimes the stock is a hard sell to CPAs and lawyers. And why is this? This is going to be private stock, right? I mean, generally speaking, we're not buying public companies here. And so it's the stock isn't very liquid unless you find a buyer who is interested in your private company or your business. You know, it's not really something that's liquid. It's not very transferable because you have to go through a lot to be able to sell it if it's even desired by anyone else. Okay. Any questions there? Let me know.
No, you're good, Lou.
Okay.
Just know we got 7 minutes until the end. Just so.
Okay, cool. All right. Closing the deal. All right. Usually the buyer's attorney will draft an asset purchase agreement, the all important asset purchase agreement. You want to have your attorney to draw this up. Okay. The seller and their attorney will review that document and you guys will go back and forth, much like purchasing a home, just in terms of the terms and the conditions of the deal. Okay. Now, they will not change the deal. They do not change the deal, only protect their client legally. Okay, that's what they're supposed to do just in terms of the seller's attorney working with them on that deal. And generally speaking, sometimes it doesn't have to be this complex. You guys can mutually meet with an attorney to kind of work out the pros and cons of things. But of course, if you have your own attorney, and we know they're expensive, but I would recommend you having an attorney or at least a service such as, say, Legal Shield or something like that, where they can review that document for you and you can kind of go over things and bounce them off an attorney's head or mind, so to speak, before looking to finalize that document with the seller.
Quick question, Lou.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, what are the options that are available for previous reports to be canceled to purchase the company?
Say it again one more time.
What are the options available for previous reports to be canceled to purchase a company?
Previous reports, what type of reports?
That hasn't been specified.
Okay. Are we speaking of like negative credit reports on their credit? Are we speaking of consumer reports?
Yeah, if the person could, if you could add in a bit more details to help with Lou answering the question. Negative, they say negative reports. I said previous negative reports to be canceled to purchase a company.
Okay, so I'll just kind of take it where I can see it going. If we're looking at credit reports, which, you know, if there's negative information on you out there, say with Experian, or on the company rather, with Experian or Dun & Bradstreet, your options are just going to have to dispute the report like anything else and have them prove that, of course, it's legitimate and that they have the documentation to prove that whatever you agreed to, the terms of that agreement, you know, were not followed, or that you were in breach of that agreement with regard to payment, etc. Excuse me. If we're talking about negative reports from customers, then that's something different. And of course, if you have reports out there on Google, or say, Google reviews, or, some other, Yelp reviews, etc., then what you would do is look to mitigate that with responding to them if they haven't been responded to, and, kind of polishing up the public image. And hopefully I'm answering that question with the amount of detail that was given there, Russell. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think if they have anything else to ask or want clarification, I'll mention it, but nothing so far. So I think you hit some of the underpinning points on that.
Okay, excellent. Okay, moving right along here. The business structure, the type of business entity you choose will depend on three primary factors here. Okay, and structuring that new company, liability, taxation, and record keeping. Okay, and so just here's a quick look at the differences between the most common those entities that you can choose in terms of forming your new entity if you are in fact going to utilize an asset sale, okay? Sole proprietorship, of course, that's just where you're going into business in your own name. We do not recommend that, okay? If you have two or more individuals, you guys can structure a partnership, okay? Not the most desirous there, but of course, if you're looking to just move swiftly and move quickly, what you want to be able to do is protect yourself. But of course, if you're just looking to kind of get into business, you can change these items later. But having a sole proprietorship or a partnership will be the fastest routes that you can kind of take. Okay. And of course, then you'll have a corporation. And, generally speaking, I don't recommend, you can have an S Corp or a C Corp. And of course, at least for what's federally recognized, you can have an LLC. Okay. The most important thing for you to do is to actually get into business, number one. I want to say that. And then number two, take a look at how the company's expense model is set up, because you just don't want to say, oh, I want an LLC, or I want a corporation. Closely examine how that business operates and then choose your entity based on what's going to give you the lowest taxable, the lowest tax bill at the end of the year or end of the quarter, however you choose to pay your taxes with that particular industry, with that particular company. And this is based on industry, rather. Okay. Now, with your LLC, this is a pass-through entity. And of course, you can kind of, on a whole nother presentation, we can spend a whole nother hour talking about the differences between these. But I want to make sure that if you're entering into an asset sale, you do realize that you only make the decision on what type of entity you're going to use to own that new company that you're buying, or to own that existing company that you're buying. You make sure that you're making that decision based on their financials and based on what's best for that particular situation. Okay. It's never one size fits all. All right. Now, on closing day, no surprises, no new information. This should be just a formality. Okay. All the hard work has been done. You're simply signing documents, exchanging money, shaking hands, and you're going, if it's a brick and mortar location, out to that location. You're going to have your third party inventory folks come out, count everything up, and there will be a separate check cut for the inventory on hold at the very time that you take ownership over that business. Okay. And I'm going to go through here. Just really quickly, if you're looking at really purchasing a business, I want you to be very keen and very self-reflective, okay? It's not for everyone, okay? Make sure you know, if you're entering into this for the first time, really where you want to sit, where you want to be as a person, because this is an immediate obligation that you have to run into, okay? So it's not like taking a job somewhere. As soon as you close on that sale, you're responsible. Okay, you're responsible. You've put out the money, the cash, that lease, if you have an office space or if you have a brick and mortar location, has to be paid. If it goes unpaid, they're going to sue you. You will be in court. The landlords want their money. If things go wrong with the employees, again, you can end up in court. So this is a real live commitment that you have to make when you're looking to enter into business for yourself and assume an existing entity which already has these working parts, okay? Though it lowers your risk, okay? You don't get that opportunity if you haven't been in business for yourself. You don't get that opportunity to kind of grow and let your sophistication grow as you are maturing as a business owner, okay? So moving right along there. And then I want you to also just to consider, what are the pros? What are the cons? Okay. And then, what will it take for you to actually prospect and grab a hold of the right business for you? Again, look at the industries. What do you do? Where does your passion lie? Then take a look at what existing companies are out here that have revenue levels where they would be within your affordability range. Okay. And once you understand that, you can take a look online and see what's available. Okay, some have listed themselves for sale. And if they're not listed for sale, that's where you want to start your campaign of prospecting, which is simply downloading list of companies within that specific industry. And then you want to be able to put together your generic mailers or emails that you want to send to those owners to see if in fact they're interested in selling, to get that conversation started where you can keep on going. Okay. And really quickly here, final thoughts, 10 commandments for buying and owning a business really quickly. You want to pay for the past, consider the present, but buy for the future. Okay. And I want to, when you're looking at purchasing a business, think about it this way. Okay. If you know that home health care is going to continue to explode, right? That's going to garner a heavier a sales multiple, as we discussed that prior. Okay. We know how the company has performed in the past based on the financials. You want to consider the present situation that they're in, but also look at where this company may be going in the future and kind of keep that in mind. Don't get caught up in the small stuff. Keep your mind on the large stuff when you're negotiating for the sale of that business, okay? All right, buy a good business and you want to always improve on it and make it better. If you don't see how to make that business better, don't waste your time, please, okay? Follow your plan. I want you to fall in love with the profit potential, not the product or the service. In other words, keep your mind in the numbers. And far too often we see where business owners are not oriented towards their numbers and they've somehow fell in love with the product and everything else. If you're going to be in business for yourself, fall in love with the numbers, okay? With regard to paying, I want you to use technology. And we had a robust discussion on this yesterday on automating that company. A lot of the businesses that are for sale are not going to be automated, right? They're not going to use CRMs, customer relationship management systems to track their customers. They may be using some sort of system that, maybe from their processing of credit cards, et cetera, et cetera. That's not good enough. You want to capture all of your customer data in another system so that you can automate all of your outgoing marketing, emails, throwing out incentives, discounts, things to bring them back in with different specials and promotions, et cetera, et cetera. Keep your mind on how to improve that business using technology. Identify what factors drive the business. And when you're examining that location, look at the employees. How do they interact with the people? Could you replace that employee with someone who's better, more customer service oriented, right? And then also I want you to look at, how you can be proud of that business, okay? And how you'd be able to further it by forming different relationships out there that can make that business explode exponentially, okay? So it's not just about what the owner's doing right now. Maybe they have no social media imprint, right? Maybe they're only supplying their goods or services locally. Maybe they have not bothered to put together a scheme to get this out nationally or even worldwide if this is some type of service that can be deployed online, okay? And then lastly, what's it worth to you? And when I say only you know that answer, you have to take a look at your lifestyle, how things are going for you, what kind of time can you put forward on this, how will it impact your family, et cetera, okay? All right, and that's it, guys. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any final questions, please throw those in the chat for us.
Yeah, and just real quickly, like I said, we're here at the market. We did start a little bit late here, so apologize for that, but just want to get all this great information to you. Right at the end, Lou mentioned, make sure it's worth what it is for you. And Lou mentioned a number of times repeatedly throughout this presentation, which what I'm going to mention goes beyond the scope of this, but it's something to consider, and we might even be thinking about doing a presentation on this later on. But the idea of negotiations. Everything with this particular aspect of building a business, a lot of it is just about negotiations. Having the information available to you, knowing what is and isn't real, what's possible, what's not possible, and then really presenting your argument about what's going to work best for you. And one of the key issues around negotiation is the more information that you have, the more powerful position you'll be in to negotiate what really makes sense. So that's something just wanted to share. And Lou mentioned this repeatedly, just to negotiate. And he presented a lot of the hard aspects of buying a business, the numbers, the licensing, things of that nature. But there's a soft side, which is just as important. That's the whole idea. And the skill set around negotiating. And a big part of that is around the due diligence, getting the information, what they may be hiding, what about the industry they may not be aware of, but so you can potentially negotiate a lower price that makes more sense. Because then, of course, obviously, if you want to turn a higher profit, buying the product or buying the business or buying the brand, what have you, at a lower price point allows you that much more of a shorter sort of time horizon to then turn a profit if the business isn't already doing so. So that's just something I wanted to quickly mention that's very, very important. We didn't go into that, but it's something I would even recommend folks look at. You can take an online course or just do some research into it. And like I said, we're maybe thinking about doing something along those lines. But there's the idea of negotiating, because it is a big, big, big part, understated to many respects, when it comes to sort of buying deals. Even when you're bringing on vendors, if you own a different type of business, just negotiating with the vendors and negotiating with a consultant, so on and so forth. So that's just something I just wanted to quickly mention as well.
Thank you, Russell. Thanks for pointing out those points here. Just looking back through the chat to make sure we've covered everything with everyone. Hey there, Thomas, over at Battles. Good to see you on the line there today. I did hear or see a question lastly here of what are the thoughts on using a broker to search for companies for sale? So how that typically works is this. Brokers are going to be employed by the sellers. Okay, you usually won't find business brokers who work with buyers. Largely, they would consider that a waste of their time. But if you're looking to go down that route, they probably will require payment from you up front. And of course, if you can get the expertise and advice of a professional who does this for a living, I hands down recommend doing that, okay? But for a lot of this, it really is the groundwork that you're gonna have that you can do yourself. And so being able to negotiate directly with those sellers is really what you want to learn how to do. And so again, very simply, if you're looking to prospect, getting those lists, okay, paying for the list. Again, I recommended using Data Axle, best out there for data, making sure you download the reports that show the company's owner's name, first name, their revenues, how long they've been in business, how many employees they may have, all those finer points that you want to use, because you want to make a good decision on who you're prospecting, right? And then once you have that, develop what type of correspondence you're going to have to communicate with them via mail or email, or if you're going to have a script and you're going to call them up, right? In order for a broker to do that, you're going to have to pay them. And if you have the funds to do so, feel free, go right ahead. But I think it's also good for you to get the experience actually speaking with these individuals, to ask the right questions and hear what they say, because there are going to be some common threads and common themes as you go along in these conversations. And that's going to educate you as a buyer as well. So hopefully I answered that question about my thoughts on using a broker to search for those companies for sale. So if we have any other questions, you can throw them in the chat. If not, I want to definitely thank you. Thank everyone for joining us today here. I hope that I've imparted some knowledge on you, and Rasul has imparted some knowledge on you to help you in making a decision to examine buying an existing enterprise out there to lower your risk and help you to break even right away or make a profit right away, so that you can express your way to success. All right. And from the Washington Area Community Investment Fund, we're signing off. Thank you.
Yeah, and just quickly, as mentioned before, a lot of information was contained within. We will be emailing this to all participants. It's something that we do regularly for all of our presentations and workshops, so you will have access to that. Thanks so much again for your time. I really appreciate you hanging in there with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the week. Stay safe out here, folks. Lots of things going on. Take care, and we'll be in touch soon. Have a great one.
Thank you. All right, guys. Bye-bye.